Welcome, everybody, to the Center for the Study of Tennesseans in War. We're privileged today to have Kevin Mason with us to talk to us about his story before his military service, during military service, and after military service. The center's mission is to record these stories for posterity, for researchers and the public, and anyone interested in anyone in our region who's been involved in war over the last 300 years. Kevin, welcome to the center.
Well, thank you.
Appreciate you coming here. Could you start by telling us all where you were born and raised and a little bit about that place?
Well, I was born in 1955 at St. Albans Naval Hospital. My father was stationed with the Nike batteries that surrounded New York City, providing air defense during the Cold War. Now, he was based out of Fort Totten, but worked on the various Nike sites on Long Island, which of course led to my interest into seafaring at that point in time when I grew up there. Stayed there for about up until the fourth grade. My father retired in 1960 and got a job with North American Aviation. And at that time, Grumman was producing the F-105 Thunder Chief on Long Island, and North American Aviation was subcontracted to do the radar work on that. As part of working for that corporation, we got transferred out to Phoenix, Arizona, and my father worked at Luke Air Force Base. He became very ill and basically returned back to Greeneville, Tennessee to die. That was not shared with me. That was probably the single most traumatic event in my life, was my father's death about 2 weeks before my 13th birthday. And from there, when my mom was being briefed on VA benefits and things like that, the person representing the VA noticed that my mom was originally German. She became a naturalized citizen in 1957. And he said, well, lady, why don't you just go back where you came from? And my mom took him up on that, and we did, because she would get the support from her German side of the family. And I ended up going to high school in Mannheim American High School, which was actually designed for the dependents that we called them back then, not as we call them family members today, of military personnel. And in Mannheim, there are quite a few military posts around there. And of course, being a similar age as to the young soldiers, there was a lot of conflict and competition for female attention, drugs, various things that youth look for in that period of their lives as growing up. And of course, during that time, from 1969 to 1973, like the sword of Damocles, we had the draft hanging over our head. I had not planned to go into the military originally until probably late as a junior. I had to figure out, how am I going to pay for my college? And that's what led me on the road into the military, because my mom obviously couldn't afford it.
Kevin also has extensive family military history, and a lot of that family military history you can find and access in Kevin's bio and on our website. So hope you will check that out. I imagine that some of that family military history might have soaked into you at a young age and maybe also influenced your interest in the military in addition to paying for college.
I think possibly some, because I was very interested in going to sea as a child. I think my dream was to drive, sail a schooner across the South Pacific Islands, delivering mail and pigs or whatnot. And so a lot of the shows, I was interested in the Horatio Hornblower series. I got a book when I was a child called Great Battles and Naval Heroes that really interested me in the sea. But as I grew along and kind of some of the things I saw in the military during the Vietnam era kind of turned me off to that. I was actually targeting more along the line of becoming either an architect or a lawyer. While looking for ways to fund my college, I applied to both the U.S. Military Academy at West Point and the U.S. Naval Academy at Annapolis. I also applied for the Navy ROTC scholarship and the Army ROTC scholarship. Probably the best interview I did was with the Navy. They seemed very interested in me. Unfortunately, I do have color defective vision. I failed the isochromatic dots, where you read the numbers in the circle. And I had to take what's called the Farnsworth Lantern test, which are 2 points of light, and they put filters over each one of those lights. So it can be green, red, or white. And so if you got green on top, red on the bottom, I could easily see that, say green on top, red on the bottom. But if you put green on top and white on the bottom, and I take my glasses off, which is what the specialist made me do, it comes to me as kind of a greenish blur. And it's a 50-50 chance of getting that right, whether it was green on top or green on the bottom. I can't do it. I failed that particular test, and I got a very nice letter from an admiral in the Navy explaining the condition that I had and why I was no longer fit for naval service. So then everything turned towards the Army. I did not get the West Point appointment. I interviewed for a West Point ROTC scholarship. The interview went very poorly. They asked me what I wanted to be. I said a lawyer. They said they had enough lawyers. They asked my next question. I did fairly well in chemistry. I said maybe the chemical corps. And they also said, well, we have no need for that either. So I basically thought, well, screw you. That's a polite way of putting it. And I didn't get that. Ended up going to Michigan State University, although I was recruited for soccer to play at the Citadel along with several other folks that I went to high school with. But I didn't get my my acceptance letter to the Citadel until I'd already made my commitment to Michigan State. I ended up there, got a 3-year Army ROTC scholarship. I did reapply my first year there for West Point, never heard anything, but after accepting the scholarship, I did get an appointment to West Point from Congressman Quillen's office, which I had to turn down because I wasn't going to restart a 4-year commissioning cycle when I already had 2 years under the belt, and ended up going into the Army.
You've got several connections to Tennessee in your early life, right?
Yes.
Your dad, you said, wanted to come back to Greeneville, and also you went to school here for a time. Did I read
Yes,
that right?
I went to middle school here when my dad came back to die. My family, the Mason family, immigrated into the United States from Ireland. Actually, County Derry, although it's a portion that sticks down very close to Cookstown and very close to Tyrone County, which a lot of people assumed is where we came from. And it's evident from some things that we already had family in Greeneville, which is why they ended up in Greeneville. They came over in, I believe, July or August of 1840 on the SS Memphis into New York. And family lore is somehow they got down to Philadelphia and they went by covered wagon or whatever into Greeneville. And they married into several families that had been established in Greene County long before Tennessee was a state. The Carters and the Ross family, for instance.
And Kevin's currently building a house. It's taking him a little bit longer than he and his wife wanted, but they'll be moving to Tennessee too in the future. What did your mom think about your decision to enter the military? Did she understand you needed to pay for college and she was okay with it?
Yeah, I mean, she probably would have liked me to go into something else, but yeah, she supported me. I can't complain about that.
Mm-hmm.
And then to be honest, when I was stationed in Germany, I did 3 tours in Germany. I was able to visit my mom on weekends and things. Well, not on weekends, not all the time, but occasionally visit. I spent a lot of time in the field. My first year in in Germany, I spent 265 days sleeping on the ground someplace. So.
Yeah. So 3 years at the Army ROTC at Michigan State.
Correct.
What was that like? And then when you graduated that, my assumption is they give you a list for you to put what you would like, and what did you put on that list?
Well, at Michigan State, I really didn't participate in ROTC that much. I think because I had most of the people I talked with were the prior veterans that were in that program, and they really didn't participate in the cadet activities that much either. And until one of the instructors said you need to up your game, so I did start to participate a little bit more. I did okay. I mean, I could have been a distinguished military graduate, but I graduated early because, like I said, I was trying to save money going through college. And I turned down the DMG and said, give it to somebody else who needs it to apply for a regular Army commission, because I'd already gotten my regular Army commission and whatnot. While there, I went to airborne school in 1975. I was 19 years old. That was a treat. 2 weeks in August and the first week of September, and being fair-haired, constantly looking up at the sun, I was red as a lobster, badly sunburned. It was fun. It was very physical, but it was fun. We were told we're in the 3rd class that had females in it. And the instructors there are called black hats because they wear black baseball caps. And whenever things were going to get rough, the three females and Corporal Lewis, the female instructor, would jog off to the powder room as the rest of the black hats gathered around us and made us beat our boots and do push-ups, which may seem like a penalty, but actually what they're doing is they're building up the musculature around your bone structure that are going to absorb the shock when you hit the ground. But I don't know why the females couldn't participate in that, but that's what it was like back in the Army when we started the integration of females into the forces. And that, like I said, that was August, September 1975. I got on my platoon sergeant's shit list and spent a lot of my time mowing grass on Fort Benning on my off-duty hours. So, and kind of mentioned that and the other thing, we had a special task for those of us who were cadets, and that was, I guess, the West Point class had gone a week or two before us. We were the bellboys carrying their baggage out to their C-141 that was taking them back. That kind of ticked me off because, you know, when I graduated, I had to carry my own damn bags. So I mentioned that to our professor of military science, Colonel Martin, who was a West Point graduate himself, and he brought it up, credit to him, and that type of stuff stopped. Since we're not being paid, we're not going to be doing the menial chores of lawn mowing, and we're not going to be carrying the West Pointers baggage. So that was good. Now, my mentor at that time was Colonel Arthur H. Booth, an African-American officer. Probably a lot of the first general officers that were African-American stand on his shoulders. He was a pioneer. He was the United States Army Europe Inspector General at the time. And he told me that if I got injured at jump school, I would lose my scholarship and I would not get commissioned because we're not covered. We had the ROTC Region Commander come down and visit us at Michigan State. Geraldo Rivera was at that, and we were able to ask questions. And I pointed that out, and the general officer said that's not true. And I said, no, I talked to the IG. He said that's true. All I needed him was to make it a commitment that, yeah, I'll look into it or something like that. But he kept on trying to deflect off to something else, and I constantly pursued. And after that, I was called into the colonel's office and told to, should have respected his rank. But I just turned back to him and said, hey, just take it. I mean, and say, I'll look into it. That's all I was asking for. So that's kind of the mindset I had in the military. So it's kind of obvious why I'm not wearing stars on my shoulders at this point in time.
So we finished the ROTC at Michigan State.
One more thing.
Yeah.
We had a veteran of the Spanish-American War visit our ROTC detachment who had been an ROTC instructor like in the 1910s or whatever. And he was going to donate his NCO sword to the organization. And I got to be his escort. All I could think of is, oh my God, don't let this guy die on me. Later on, one of the instructors there was trying to abscond with that sword. When he left, I had to go once again to Colonel Martin, and say, hey, look, sir, that was given to the organization, not to the individual. And he took care of that. But the branch choices I took is I wanted to be infantry was first. My second choice was military intelligence, which also meant I got a background investigation, which led to my having a top secret clearance, which had a major effect on my career.
And with that military intelligence, your German language skills?
Yes,
maybe factored in.
May have factored into that. Although my dad was an infantry officer originally, most of his work was in military intelligence when he was a counterintelligence when he was in Germany, and that's actually how he met my mother. My mother worked for basically the refugee department of the state of Baden-Württemberg, and trying to get all the displaced people after the war back to their home countries, the people that were the slave labor into the Nazi war machine, the prisoners of war, the concentration camp inmates, and trying to get them relocated with their families and get them back to and get them resettled to where they came from. While my father was reviewing these particular lists in order to find individuals that came from certain Eastern Bloc countries behind the Iron Curtain and see if they were suitable for recruiting as intelligence sources for the United States. And that's basically how they first met. And that was in the 1950s.
So infantry number 1, intelligence number 2.
Armor number 3, and field artillery number 4.
Mm-hmm. And what did you get?
I got infantry.
Okay.
So I was pretty sure I was going to get infantry. I got infantry, and I got a regular Army commission out of that. But the paperwork for that would actually come in much later. And if it had come in earlier, I would have had a date of rank before the West Point class. But if you get a date or you swear into your office on 1 May or later, your date will be 1 day, your date of rank will be 1 day after the graduation of the West Point class. And of course, the Army sometimes works slow on their bureaucracy. My swearing in into the regular Army was on 1 May. And so I was not pleased about that. I was scheduled to go to infantry officer basic course at Fort Benning in June of 1977. And they had an experimental OCS class, which was the first one integrated with female candidates at Fort Benning. And at the end of that particular cycle, and there were a lot of issues with that course. There was kind of a black cloud that hung over it. They had a lot of infantrymen that graduated from that now needed to go to the basic course, and they added an ad hoc basic course, 501-77, that would have started on 3 April. They contacted me and asked if I wanted to go there to that particular course. And I said, yes. I was naive. I should have thought that out. I just didn't have enough information, and I'll play out on what some of the problems were there. So because I get 2 days travel time, my active duty date was 1 April. That was an omen, Fool's Day, and it kind of followed me the rest of my career in a humorous way. So I go down to class 501-77, and we had a lot of issues in the Army in the 70s and the immediate post-Vietnam era. We had drug issues in the Army. We had a lot of racial strife in the Army. There were times where in the unit I was going to go to that the various company barracks were partitioned off by barbed wire, so people from other companies couldn't come in there. So they would NCOs that were taking showers in the shower rooms would have an armed guard to protect them. I mean, it was really, really bad back then. Well, in 501-77, we had the officers that came out of OCS, and we had 12 recycled officers that were academic failures from a previous infantry basic course. They were all African-American soldiers, and they had filed an IG complaint, which is why they got reinstated. And that caused a lot of racial strife within the organization or within that particular class. It wasn't so much it was black versus white. It was more the OCS group, including the black officers that graduated with that OCS class, really did not particularly like what the other black officers that were the recycles. And I don't know if there was a past history because they'd been in the hallways of the same building for instruction and knew some of the shenanigans that got pulled there. But I'll tell you right now, it led to the death of a University of Tennessee graduate, Second Lieutenant Richard Thurman, because one of those 12 recycles actually shot him in the head during an exercise called Small Arms for Air Defense, where they fly a remote-controlled plane back and forth, and there's a firing line. And the intent is that your squad leader will pick a place in the sky that the plane's going to fly through. You'll all aim at that point in the sky, and the plane flies through all the bullets that are going up there, and that will knock it down. And in this particular case, the guy traversed around kind of like Dick Cheney, the vice president, did, and shot Rick Thurman behind the ear, exited out through his nostril, and Rick Thurman died there. Now, I will say, I was supposed to be on that position. Rick came up to me seconds before and said, "You were on the last live fire, let me do this one." And I turned around and gave him the M60. And the first thought in my head, my God, that should have been me. And that was like on the 2nd or 3rd of May. And all of a sudden, having a date of rank after the West Point class was not that freaking important, to be honest with you. It's a friend.
And that was one of your earliest experiences in the Army too. This is you're fresh out of ROTC. You're at Fort Benning and engaging in basic training, getting ready for combat, and this is your first kind of introduction to life in the military.
Yeah, that's true. But I don't think it hit me as bad then as it does now, because there's some survivor guilt, especially with other folks that I know that died in service. But yeah, it was a tough.
Yeah, and are you in communication with your family at this point? Do Do you have a girlfriend? Are you married?
No. I had a girlfriend. She was still going to Michigan State University. Actually, she eventually got into the Army and became a helicopter pilot. Got shot down while she was a flight instructor at Fort Rucker by some angry farmer, and they made a precautionary landing. There's actually an article in the New York Times about her. But that relationship did not last my first tour in Germany. I brought her over several times, but to be honest with you, too poor at a second lieutenant pay at that period in time, you couldn't afford to get married. So it just didn't outlast the length that we were apart.
And so that's your first deployment is over to Germany.
My first assignment to Germany. Yeah, I got assigned to the unit in October of 1977. The unit was out in the field. They're getting ready to come back in a day or two. Actually, it was my sponsor's wife that showed me my POQ. I remember sitting in the chair with two other of my IOBC classmates as the company commanders walked by. We were like puppies in a pet store. I'll take that one. I'll take that one. After we were asked what courses we had been to, and I ended up being a weapons platoon leader for Alpha Company 1st Battalion, 52nd Infantry, located in Warner Barracks in Bamberg, Germany, part of the 1st Armored Division's 3rd Brigade, which was interesting. Another area that had racial strife in it is Bamberg, because we put so many troops in that city that there was a lot of competition for female attention in the bars and whatnot. You had troop type bars, you had the racial strife. The Scotch bar was the African American bar. And people in Bamberg were not that friendly to Americans. For instance, in the case that caused a riot downtown, soldiers could buy at a pickup window, like pommes frites, French fries, and then they weren't allowed to go inside if it was inclement weather to eat them. And that caused a little bit of consternation, and eventually a little pushing and shoving. Next thing you know, soldiers are not dumb. They call back to the barracks, and now troops are coming in to kind of clean house. So you have the Germans against the Americans, and in this case, it was a couple of black soldiers that bought the French fries that were trying to go into the restaurant to get out of the rain or the cold or whatever. And it was the soldiers clean clock. So of course, the next thing is courtesy patrol. So now you have a representative from each one of the units down walking the district there, the entertainment district, which was kind of funny because at around 3 a.m. in the morning, the only people in that district are the people on courtesy patrol looking at each other trying to police things up. But that was just another night you didn't get sleep. You had company duty officer, which was a before and after midnight check of the troop billets, which is probably twice a week for an officer. You probably pulled battalion staff duty officer, which was all night duty, 2 weekdays out of the month and probably 1 weekend out of the month. And on top of that, you had brigade staff duty officer, which was also another weekday out of the month, and probably a weekend every second month. So quite a few days where you did not get any sleep. And we didn't get the next day off. We actually had to come back in and finish up a full day's work when we came off duty back then.
Did having family in Germany make that easier for you to deal with all those situations?
Not really. Like I said, I spent a lot of time in the field my first year there. So that was, other than being able to spend a week at home before I reported to the unit. I brought my girlfriend over during the Christmas time period, but I had duty on Christmas because I was a bachelor. That it just happened to work out that way. And of course, I took her on a sightseeing tour for about a week while we were there, which was kind of funny because it was really heavy fog almost the entire time. If you could see, there's a castle on that hill. But no, I didn't spend much time my first year at home. Was able to bring a couple of other officers back to my mom's house for, like, say, Thanksgiving and stuff like that. But later on, as I got more seniority and had a little bit more time, yeah, maybe I'd be able to go back home maybe once every 2 months or whatnot.
And how long were you in Germany?
First time I was in Germany, August of 1980, so 34 months. So credit for a 3-year tour, and then I had to get back to the infantry officer advanced course. My last year in Germany, I spent with something called the United States Army Standoff Target Acquisition System, which was an experimental unit, a forerunner of JSTARS. It used a rotating SLAR boom, side-looking airborne radar, so the acronym is SLAR, to pick up what we call moving target indicators, MTIs. It's covered a little bit in General Sir John Hackett's book, The Third World War. But the system was actually designed to pick up illegal aliens crossing over from Mexico into the United States. I mean, you could have that type of fidelity. I could open up the parameters and watch a football game as you know, ex-generals kind of on the field. But the idea on that system was to identify the second echelon of Soviet attacking forces, and then using our attack helicopters do what we call the deep strike to knock those out. And which was it was interesting. It cut down the amount of field time I had. I remember one time General Patton's son, George S. Patton III, came to visit and was asking my search and track operators, who were actually watching the screens, questions. And I asked him to direct his questions to me because we had a mission in the air and it was expensive. And he unloaded on me, basically said, "I'm the son of a bitch who's going to buy this system. I'll talk to who I want to." Okay. I met him again and his son. General Patton had a history of being a hard drinker, and I understood why. I was the officer in charge of the Special Olympics in Fort Devens, Massachusetts, and his son is mentally disabled, and it was a sad sight to see. That was another tough assignment.
We talk about the Cold War, and there's a lot of ideologies kind of swirling around, you know, American freedom and democracy and communist tyranny. Did any of that kind of high politics influence you or shape your military service in Germany, or were you sort of insulated from all that?
No, I wasn't insulated because I was in my second company command was in a NATO unit that was deterrence and securing the flanks of NATO. And that was very, very political. I mean, literally I had the Queen of the Netherlands come in, got invited to the Grand Duke of Luxembourg's soiree, which was like it was like watching something from the 1800s Napoleonic era when it was a kind of like a formal ball, everybody in their uniforms. With their partners dancing around. That was something to see. Had to brief the ambassador of the United States to Italy on the Stinger air defense system. I had a Stinger platoon attached to that my company when we deployed. So yeah, got to play with the high part on that. But I think what really bothers me about the Cold War is how the State Department and the Defense Department are in denial. That for a while, there's been a movement to get a Cold War service medal for these individuals. And to be honest with you, when I see the plethora of medals that have come out since the global war on terrorism, I kind of say, yeah, maybe it's time that their service is recognized, because when the wall fell, and I was in Germany when the wall fell. I mean, in January of 1991, I was in Berlin at the military operations and urban terrain site that the Berlin Brigade had, and we were training on fighting in urban operations. And it was a divided city. And then in November, the wall comes down. I mean, I couldn't see that. I mean, we were in Mount and a Russian attack helicopter. Hind. I didn't hear it come in. It was so quiet, and it just popped up over the wall. And I'm looking at it. I mean, I could see the pilot's eyes. It was just incredible. It's kind of scary, to be honest with you. But for instance, the Department of Defense, they have in a letter basically saying it was not a period of military conflict. It was military tension and economic competition, et cetera, et cetera. Well, I hate to say this, but a lot of people died during the Cold War. When you think about the U-2 pilot that was shot down over Cuba during the Cuban Missile Crisis, the soldiers who lost their lives on the Korean DMZ, we had something like 200 aircraft on reconnaissance missions shot down from both the Air Force and Navy. No, it wasn't military tensions and economic competition killing them. It was enemy bullets and explosives that killed them. And to be honest with you, when the terrorist activity was picking up in Europe in the 1970s and 80s, it didn't seem like there was any interest in having a global war on terrorism then either. And we lost a lot of not only military members, but dependents too that were stationed in Germany, Italy, and Greece at the time. So yeah, maybe its time has come for a Cold War service medal. So
that's a good point. You said that was the first time you were in Germany. How many times were you in Germany?
I got credit for 3 tours in Germany. I returned to Germany in 1987, worked at the 21st TACOM Theater Army Area Command, which is basically the big support unit there. And I have to say that was probably one of the more enlightening assignments I had, because I got to see big Army for the first time. I love serving at battalion and brigade levels, since it's more familial in nature there, but actually seeing the war plans for fighting in Germany, the return to forces to Germany, the reforger exercises in Germany. I was a project officer for the 21st TACOM for something called Able Archer, which was a nuclear command and control release exercise that almost led to war. I think it was Able Archer 84 that the Russians overreacted and thought we were actually going to launch a preemptive nuclear strike. And thank God they had some officers there that used common sense too. And it was used to exercise NATO in order to meet and then go through whatever their decision-making process was to release nuclear weapons. And somehow I guess the Soviets tapped into our communications during that exercise and thought it was a real thing. Got to see our war plans on bringing soldiers over. I worked for some tremendous general officers. 2 very influential ones I worked for were Brigadier General Gus Pagonis, who went on to work on the force reception onward movement of forces during the Gulf War, and rapidly went up the ranks to lieutenant general. His book about that experience is Moving Mountains. I was his PIREP officer, which was Pompous Inspection Reconnaissance Exercise Program, which are units that are based in the United States would come over to Europe, and then they would see their equipment sets that were in storage. They would see where their ammunition was kept. They would get briefings on how they were going to be received and what the marshaling areas were, and then they would go out and they would tour their battle positions in order to come up with their plans on how to actually fight the tactical and operational level of battle. And so I got to meet a lot of folks on that. Just a tremendous opportunity. So that I did that, and then there was trouble with one unit. It was an infantry unit, and I guess the second General Wilson is the one who told their AG, why don't you ask Mason if he wants to take the company? And I did, and that was another experience. And that's where I got to travel all over Europe. Our contingency areas were in Norway, Denmark, Greece, Italy, and we had 3 separate ones in Turkey. And I got to do exercises in Norway, Denmark, and Italy. I got to recon one of the Turkey sites, which was on the Syrian and Iraqi border. Gaziantep, which just got hit by a earthquake in that area just recently in Turkey. So yeah, it was a lot of fun. That was a good exercise.
What was your opinion of NATO at the time? Did you feel like it was making a real difference in Europe?
Well, NATO had 2 purposes, and I've seen NATO's getting a lot of criticism. But one of its major purposes was to keep another war from breaking out in Europe. And the fact that you had Greece and Turkey working together on NATO when they can't stand each other is a good sign. The fact you've integrated Germany, which has been the cause of several wars, previous during the 100 years prior to NATO, that was another good sign. So that's kind of the importance. Now, knowing how competent NATO is, I can't tell you that based on the organization I was in, because these were hand-picked units that were in this force. So we got the Italian Bersaglieri, the mountain troops. France didn't participate with troops in that particular unit. We had one of the battalions of the parachute regiment from the British Army. We Luxembourg provided us with the tow sections And then, of course, we get augmented by other things. Canada, the Royal Canadian Regiment. So we had some really top of the line folks in this organization when we deployed. For the southern areas, we had 3rd of the 325 Infantry that was stationed in Vicenza in Italy. So it was top of the line. Matter of fact, of the officers, while I was there, all majors at the time, was Major Johnny Abizad, who ended up becoming a general officer, commanded CENTCOM for a period of time. Major Carl Eikenberry, who ended up becoming a lieutenant general and the U.S. ambassador to Afghanistan while we were there. And I don't know if he ended up being a lieutenant general or not, but it was Major Mick Bednarik, who was an IOAC classmate of mine, advanced course, really great guy that ended up getting into the general officer ranks too. So yeah, it was hard charges in that outfit. Good group.
And after Germany, what happened next? Was it 3 tours in Germany and then you got out of the military?
Well, I extended in Germany to take the command, and I got credit for 3 tours, but it was actually, I did 4. I did 4.5, 5 years in Germany. I got there in 87. I left in December of 91. So, and I'll tell you,
really interesting time to be in Germany.
Well, yes and no.
Yeah.
The issue is I was in Korea when Grenada hit. When in Germany in 91, all the fair-haired children in the USAR headquarters got positions to go down range. I had just come out of command. I should have been one of the first officers to get assigned to a unit that needed to be beefed up. And I ended up filling one of the back positions from one of the fair-haired children at USAR headquarters. So I spent the entire Gulf War. So I missed out on the 2 big events at that period of time. I'm not a combat vet, no longer competitive, to be honest with you, at that point in time. And then, of course, at the end of the Gulf War, it was the downsizing. We're going to get the peace dividend, and that led to me taking voluntary or early retirement.
And what year was that they took?
I took it in 95.
1995.
Yeah.
And were you married at this point?
Yes, I met my wife in 1990. I think we got married August of 1991 in Heidelberg, Germany.
Did you meet her in Germany?
Yes, I did. She was a West Point graduate. She was a lieutenant in the Supply and Services Company located on Spinelli Barracks in actually Foydenheim. That's one of the small towns surrounding Manhattan, which is where I was stationed with headquarters company AMFL.
And what did she think about your decision to retire?
Oh, she agreed with it. She saw, for a period of time, I was assigned into probably the most bankrupt unit I've ever seen. The battalion commander got relieved because he was involved in a relationship with the female S1. I've never seen a place like that. Another company commander was sleeping with her NCOs. 2 of the company commanders' wives were, I guess, got drunk one night or something, and went to the barracks, and I don't even go into what happened there, but the charge of quarters had to call up one of the company commander and say, you need to get your wife out of the barracks. It was incredibly bad. And this is the company I'm supposed to clean up. We were an AL-01 infantry company hidden in the 21st TACOM. So we always got the dregs of everything. And it was attached to this maintenance battalion for logistical and admin support, since I didn't have the battalion staff. And I guess probably the thing I'm most proud of is when I was talking, like I mentioned, those majors from down in Italy, and I were meeting in Heidelberg for an AMFL meeting, and General Burleson, who was the chief of staff for the commanding general of USAR, at that time the commander-in-chief, United States Army Europe, came in, and when we all introduced ourselves, he kind of pointed me in the chest, poked me in the chest. I want to talk to you in my office as soon as possible. And I thought, oh my God, what happened now? Did he see one of my vehicles driving down the road with the, not properly tied down and looking like crap or what? And I made the appointment. His secretary was very nice. What time would be convenient for you, Major? And I said, whatever time is convenient for the general, I'll be there. It was a 20-minute drive from where I'm stationed. And I got up there and I talked to him. He says, I want to know what problems you're having. And I basically told him. I told him the systemic problems we had with our table of organization and equipment. I told them we got the dregs from the infantry. Anybody that had a profile, which means they couldn't do exercises or didn't qualify with the weapon or were PT failures, because they would go, the good ones would go all out to the troop units, but then they'd find out, oh, there's an infantry unit in the 21st TACOM logistics unit. Let's send them all the people that are broken. Outdated equipment, having like last priority on training areas. And in the time it took me to drive back home, the phone was ringing off the hook in my unit. The CQ came to me and said, "Sir, what the hell did you do up in Heidelberg?" And things happened, but a lot of toes got stepped on, and a lot of people were really, really angry with me. For instance, I tried to get what it was. We were getting ready for the exercise in Norway, and we were going to deploy in February. I tried to get the what was called ICWIX, Extended Cold Weather System, clothing, Extended Cold Weather Clothing System, which was the Gore-Tex equipment at that time. Up until then, we were using the model 1951 parka from the Korean War and the stupid Mickey Mouse boots, the big rubber boots that you see on soldiers in the Korean War, when there's far better equipment out there. We still had the M16A1 and as opposed to the M16A2. I didn't have Dragons. I had 90mm recoilless rifles, also weapon systems that date from Korea and Vietnam. So as you can see, we're at the tail end of the supply system there. And the table of organization and equipment, because we were drivers for the NATO staff and a security element for the NATO staff in this company, they actually gave me drivers that you would have in a transportation unit. I forget what their MOS number is. It wasn't a call for that. These guys are just driving the Humvees or the Cup Vs we had at that time as they phased out the Jeep. They didn't need to, know how to drive a 5-ton tractor trailer or whatnot. So we cleaned all that up. They all became 11 Bravos, which kind of helped on the training side, making it much easier than having all these different MOSs with all the different training requirements. We got updated equipment, and so things worked out a lot better. Got started getting people in that had experience in the 82nd Airborne or the Ranger battalions. So yeah, things were on the roll up, and we did really, really well. Actually got the Expert Infantry Company Streamer, which is when 65% of your company takes the EIB test or has EIB or CIB, Combat Instrument Badge. The passing rate for my group was 75%. We did not take it with a unit in-house. We actually took it with the 8th Infantry Division. Normal passing rate for the EIB candidates is somewhere between 15 and 20%. So yeah, I'm really proud of that unit, the turnaround there. The previous commander just shut the door and worked on his master's degree in something while he was there, which is probably the reason why the general asked me to take over that unit. So yeah, that was good.
And what was your rank when you retired in 95?
I retired as major.
Okay. And what happens next?
I went back to the University of Tennessee on the GI Bill, and my intent was to get a master's in history and a master's in education in order to teach high school history.
Did you live here in Knoxville?
I lived in Farragut.
Okay.
And I commuted. My directing professor was Professor Stephen Ash. On my thesis committee, I had Dr. Lilavicius and Dr. Johnson, Charles Johnson. So yeah, and there was another professor here. He wrote The Deadly Brother. His name's not coming to my mind right now. He teaches in Rolla right now, Missouri. S&T. Well, anyway, but yeah, took a lot of history courses here. Was looking for a job, finished up in 98. In 99, I get a phone call out of the blue, never worked for this company. But my wife had done some part-time work for them as a logistics analyst, and they asked me if I wanted to go back to Germany. So I did. I was only going to stay there 3 years, get to see my mom again. I had a daughter by that time, 4-year-old daughter, who was born here in Knoxville when I was a student. My first year I was here, and started working, basically teaching staffs the military decision-making process and playing OPT4 on computer war game simulations at various levels. That's one of the things we got to do. Is in January, before Operation Iraqi Freedom, we had to go in for a major exercise, sworn to secrecy, the whole 9 yards, and we exercised the war plan that we got to see play out several months later. That was that was interesting. That was really, yeah, okay, I'm glad I could help in doing something like this. Hopefully it saves some lives.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And how long were you over there in Germany for this?
I basically stayed there from 1999 till 2010, April 2010. I came back, I think, in 2000 for a 2-week exercise at Fort Leavenworth. And I came back in 2009 to work with the Marine Corps. We were preparing a Georgian infantry battalion in order to support them in Helmand Province in the war in Afghanistan. So that's the only 2 times. And I have to say, the second time I came back after being gone nearly 10 years, I was struck at how crappy our infrastructure had turned, and the fact everybody was looking at their phone as they're driving around. I was in the Norfolk, Virginia area for that, around Fort Monroe, Virginia, and Fort Story. Yeah, it's working Marine Corps Training Assistance Group, McTAG. Yeah.
And what did your wife and daughter think about living in Germany? Your wife was
Oh, well,
probably.
she was used to it. My daughter really, glommed on to my mom. My mom passed in 2008. So while I was there, so I was kind of glad that we were there during that period of time as her health deteriorated. She died of brain cancer. It wasn't pretty at the end. This, kind of a lot like Alzheimer's. Forgetting things or acknowledging I'm there, but not talking to me. Just that was horrible. Actually, we started our daughter on the Montessori school system, so it was a private school that was outside of Ramstein Air Force Base, because I was stationed in the Kaiserslautern area. That's where the Warrior Preparation Center was. And until that was as a contractor. In 2003, I became a Department of the Army civilian, and I went to Grafenberg, which is a major training area, and was a supervisory plan specialist for training plans for the 7th, at that time, 7th Joint Multinational Training Center. It's now known as, and previously had been known as, 7th Army Training Command. But my daughter took German while she was in Montessori, and then she went to the Landstuhl, which is the major hospital there, Landstuhl Elementary School, where they had a immersion program where English and history were taught in English, but science and math were taught in German. So she got both of it, and then of course with her mother. So my daughter speaks German better than I do. I can read it, I can understand it. Speaking it, especially having not used it in the past 13 years, is probably fallen off. My writing is atrocious. As my history professor said, my English writing is atrocious too. So I actually gave Dr. Ash a new box of red pens because he obviously used it on one of my papers.
That's funny. So why come back to the United States in 2010? And where did you go? Did you go back to Norfolk, Virginia?
I came back for a promotion. I ended up going to Fort Leonard Wood, where I was the G35 for the Maneuver Support Center of Excellence. G35 does future operations. The Center of Excellence there has 3 schools. They have the Military Police School, the Chemical Corps School, and the Engineer School located there. I have to say, I always felt like an outsider there. I thought, the most unfriendly place I've ever been stationed. Normally, you can integrate really rapidly in the military community, but maybe it's because I didn't have a reputation there, because I really didn't deal with these particular branches that much, where if I'd gone to a Fort Knox or gone to a Fort Benning, I would have been better received. I always felt like I was the outsider in that organization. Got very sick, got pneumonia, and spent a couple of weeks in the hospital. And there was a job position with the Office of the Program Manager, Saudi Arabian National Guard, which was another promotion. And that was to set up the Command General Staff College for the Saudi Arabian National Guard. And I signed up for that, and I did nearly 2 years in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, doing that.
Wow.
That was interesting.
You've been to some interesting places in the world.
Met some interesting people too. Yeah. What was nice about that, there was a period of time where there were problems with funding. So a lot of government employees didn't get paid for a period of time. Of course, they got their back paid to them. But I didn't have that problem, because the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia is the commander of the Saudi Arabian National Guard, and my money came back to me from him through the military support. I forget what the exact term is that you have there. So I got to meet a lot of interesting people. Although I have to say, Riyadh is, I've been there, done that, check the block, don't ever want to go back again. It's not a fun place to be honest with you.
Yeah.
And it's dirty, it's dusty everywhere.
Mm. In closing, Nick, Kevin, do you want to tell us anything that you would like our viewers to know about your military service, or your impressions of military service in general?
I would say there's a lot of propaganda that goes out there, and a lot of the truth doesn't get told. Particularly things like what's happening on the Korean DMZ. Soldiers there that are, like, for instance, the axe murders. They're carried in. That was Captain Boniface, who was posthumously promoted to major, and Lieutenant Mark Barrett, who got beaten and mauled by axes at Panmunjom, where the talks take place, the North and South Korean government and the United States Military Assistance Command. They're listed in the Defense Casualty Analysis System as non-hostile killed or accidents. Soldiers that get killed on the DMZ, whether they stray over inadvertently flying and are shot down, are listed as accidents. And that's all to downplay what actually happens there. I mean, you had soldiers out there for a period of time up until October 1991. Every night there was an ambush patrol out there that American soldiers were manning that were there to kill infiltrators. And these were members of North Korean Special Forces, and they deserve some recognition, particularly when we see what goes on with the handouts. I mean, there's like, matter of fact, what really bothers me is when there was a firefight at the JSA in '84 when a defector crossed over. It was around Thanksgiving time. That unit got authorized a combat patch, but it's listed as 1 day only and to only those who specifically participated in the firefight. No other combat patch in the U.S. Army is like that. And to give you an example, fighting ended on the 31st of October during Grenada, Operation Urgent Fury. They halted combat operations on 3 November. Yet combat patches were continued to be given out until like the 3rd week of November. No other veteran gets treated like that, and that's a shame, because a lot of that hinges on what your veteran benefits, whether you were in combat, particularly with the VA. A second thing that I think you need to know is that Agent Orange was used along and within the Korean DMZ. I did not know that until maybe 5 years ago. And I happened to come back from Korea and then started having some problems. I been classified as general anxiety disorder. Was that due to Agent Orange? I don't know. Is there a nexus? I don't know. But even then, they address the time it was used on the Korean DMZ, but they don't ask, well, what's the half-lives years afterwards? So those are some of the things that veterans are dealing with, and those are issues that I engage my elected representatives on. Another thing, I really think Frederick Green, an East Tennessean, he charged Major Hassan at the Fort Hood massacre, deserves a Valor Award. And that's something too I'm fighting for. And Calvin Ward, Medal of Honor, Dr. Lavish, I've also contacted Senator Blackburn's office in order to see if anything can be done on that through the National Defense Authorization Act. So hopefully some of those veterans issues take place, because I'm still fighting for veterans.
It's important to fight for veterans. They fight for us. And Kevin, really appreciate you coming in and sharing your story with us. And this video will be posted up on our YouTube channel, and hope you all enjoy it. Thank you.